So today, what I've got is a little bit of an unusual unboxing. This is the box that has the manuscripts to what would eventually become my first novel, She Beyond Sun. When I first started making YouTube videos, I did not really intend to ever talk about my writing because I'm just not that kind of person. But this weekend I was going through some things in my parents' attic, and I found the box which I'd put up there, and a friend was interested in seeing what went into making a book, and she wanted to see what my manuscripts looked like. So it was a lot of fun to go through it, and it brought back a lot of fun memories. So to give you a little bit of context, I wrote She Beyond Sun. I started writing it at the end of 2014, and I sent the first 20 pages to a guy called Michael Driscoll, who would go on to be the editor on the book after I'd finished the first draft, and he basically encouraged me to go all the way with it. And I did, and so I moved to Spain at the beginning of 2015, and I basically resolved to not come back to America until I had finished first draft. And I came back a little bit earlier, but I'd mainly finished by the time I came back. So this was the first book that I filled up completely. The first notebook I filled up completely. As you can see, I use a lot. This is one of the. It's a pretty small book. It's one of these Darth Vader books, and I have This is what my handwriting looks like, and at the time it was called Mr. Obsession, and everything that I have in this book was written from January 2015 to February 2015. So then was the moleskin notebook, with some pages that I had written on big paper and stuck in this. So volume 1 covered a lot of what would be in part 1 of She Beyond Sun. Part 1 of She Beyond Sun had always, had been the first thing. But when I eventually kind of lost direction, and I started to take a very structural approach to writing, and I'm extremely structural when it comes to this stuff, and I decided, and what I wrote was essentially in this book is essentially what would be in part 3 of She Beyond Sun, and that wound up. Part 3 of She Beyond Sun is roughly half the book. Part 1 and part 2 are a little bit smaller than part 3. And that was from March to July of 2015. So this was, I think, my favorite one to write in, and a big reason was because at the time I was teaching myself Arabic, and I had a really good friend, her name was Safa, and she was Moroccan Spanish, and she taught me how to write in Arabic, and in one of these pages you can actually see what she wrote for the Arabic alphabet. But so this was mainly me writing part 3, and that was from July 15th to August 23rd. And so I would say by that point I was mainly done with the first draft. This was, okay, so at this point, the name of the book changed from Mr. Obsession to the Bohr model, which was named after that model by Niels Bohr, which essentially placed basically it refers to that model which places an electron orbiting around a nucleus. And it's an imperfect model, but going from Mr. Obsession to the Bohr model, what I was really focused on was the main character's nature of obsession, and I was trying to be very literal in the title and conveying that. But the Bohr model was honestly a very boring title. So I think like I had structured it. I'd structured it as part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. But part 1 was like hydrogen 1, part 2 was hydrogen 2, so on and so forth. And there were some. I was stretching it a little bit. What I was getting at with how those different levels of hydrogen, those different isotopes, I don't really remember because I'm not a science guy, reflected what was going on in the story. This was a big chunk. This was one of the first things that was printed out, and this was after the first draft. This was something that a friend of mine, who I wanted to read, he printed out this much, and he read it to give me his thoughts. And just a really funny note. So in the part on the first page where it has the dedication, he wrote in crayon, "Serious magic right there. I hope this person is worth it." Okay, and I was wrong. So part 1 through part 3 were hydrogen 1, hydrogen 2, hydrogen 3. Part 4 is the hydrogen bond. Okay, so I don't know what I was thinking. Okay, so Bohr model. Yeah, I didn't like that title, and then it eventually changed to what is written on the box. So it says a lot that when I sealed everything up and put it in the box, the title was Trust and Love for Strangers. So when I had put everything away and was done with editing, that was the title. So She Beyond Sun, I think, came 2 titles later. It was, I think, after Trust and Love for Strangers, it became The Martyrs Cigarettes, which is a little bit better of a title, but I think still a horrible title. And then I went to She Beyond Time, and then there was something that wasn't right about She Beyond Time, so I settled on She Beyond Sun, which I'm happy with the title. I think it's a good title. I think it's a very good title, actually. I'm very proud of it. And then, the last thing I guess I'll show you, which it didn't fit inside the box, was this is what the first draft looked like. So the first draft, to give you an idea, was probably, it was, as I recall, it was 130,000 words. She Beyond Sun in its final draft was 95,000 words. So I cut out in the editing process in large part thanks to my editor Michael Driscoll. I probably shaved off 30% of the book in the editing process. There were a lot of subplots that I cut out, but here's what it was a lot. So that was my, okay, so what else can I say about this experience? I think that I was feeling a lot of different things when I was working through every single one of these books. Emotionally, I was in very different places. There was a lot happening in the world. I think it says a lot that this book was written in 2015. So this was volume 1. Here was volume 2. Oh, I guess I changed it to Bohr model a lot earlier than I ever remembered. Volume 3. This was a beautiful book. I mean, it was just I've never had a notebook that I loved more than this one. This was volume 4, and that translates to Everything That You Can Imagine Is Real. And then there's this one, which is beautiful. Hold on, I just realized that I haven't put one back in the very last volume, and I had completely forgotten about this. Honestly, I think I loved this notebook as much as I loved the leather one. This essentially the last thing I wrote was what is now part 2 of She Beyond Sun. The very last thing that I wrote in this book, which was the last thing I wrote, and what made this a first draft, was a scene that is like halfway through part 2. And if I decide to make more videos talking about the process, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So now I'm gonna put this stuff back into the box, and tomorrow I'll take it back to my parents' house, and maybe I'll see this stuff again in 10 years. I loved writing Shibion Sun. It was one of the great experiences of my life. It was my first novel. I wasn't an author before that, and then I was an author after that. So it was important to me. But it's important to move on and write new stuff, and not to get caught up in the past. But it was a great time, and it was really nice to go through all of that again. So thank you for watching this video. I appreciate your interest in this. I'll be back to reviewing books, but honestly, after doing this, I kind of feel more open about talking about writing. I might do, if people are interested, like if one person comments on one of the videos and says that they would be interested in hearing tutorials or advice on how to actually write a book, I'd be more than happy to do that. So have a great night. It's night here, which is why I say good night. Thanks again.